The concept we are exploring today is, when did God make unclean animals? So he has the life of the field, which would be the wild animals, and then we have the behemoth, which would be the cattle, the domesticated animals, and then and there are like semi-upright because they have 4 feet, and then we have those that creep on their belly, if we have the right understanding of the remes, the swiftly moving ones, where it says, for the serpent it was cursed above all cattle. So it's not semi upright, it's completely licking the ground. But that did not happen for those creeping things, the reptiles, until after Adam was kicked out of the garden. So let's look here at Genesis 2, because not until there was a man to till the ground did plants grow, or even plants in the field, in the earth, and then before it grew. So first you need somebody to till the ground, and this did not happen until Adam was kicked out of the garden. And this even says, in the day that the Lord God made earth and heavens. So we understand that there were 6 days of creation, but something happened to cast us into a lower dimension, a lower vibrancy, where God's spirit could no longer be seen. And so we were cut off. We were in this physical realm. So there's like these tiers where there's an extension of time. Instead of 6 days, like maybe 24 hours, however, this day could just be a period of time, that we got extended into 6,000 years now. And then with this final 1,000 years is understood to be the golden age that we should be entering into. So if you look at this, also, it was not raining upon the earth. So these plants are not going to grow on their own until after, until or because of the flood. So it took a while for plants to even be able to be eaten by man. And God says, after he kicks them out of the garden, that you can eat them, even though it says in, I think in chapter 1, that they are able to eat them. So there's something about chapter 1 that seems like it's complete, like he plants the plants and it names even the creeping things, but then we don't see the creeping things develop until after they're kicked out of the garden. It's actually in Genesis chapter 1 where he's telling the man, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. And then to the beasts of the earth, the fowls of the air, and the creeping things, they've given green herbs. So that's important because it'll come up after the flood. In Genesis chapter 2, it only says specifically that he's planting trees in the garden. We don't know if he's also planting herbs, because we know that these shrubberies and things are not growing until there's a man to till the ground. So he's serving the garden, but God's already planted it all. So this is going to be different. After he's kicked out of Eden, it seems completely barren, and maybe for the first time we have creeping things. So when we look at after the flood, it says, everything that lives and moves will now be food for you, just as I gave you the green plants. So in Genesis chapter 1, this is the same wording that he's talking about for the animals, the green plants. He says, I now give you all things. So how do we understand this weird wording? Everything is finished, and now it's like we're starting it again in this day that the Lord God made the earth and heavens. And we know that there's going to be this like period of like 2,000 years for animals to develop, where all flesh had corrupted itself. And Noah's going to take 7 of only the clean tamed animals, 7 of those, and 7 of the clean birds probably. But as far as like the creeping things, those were all cursed. They were cursed more than the cattle, and he's only taking 2 of each of those. All of those are unclean. So like there's these levels where all these souls are taken from the earth. So in Genesis 1, on the 6th day, let the earth bring forth these living souls. And so animals and mankind, they're all souls that are taken from the ground, but we don't actually see man being taken from the ground until he falls down to this physical stature. So here, let the earth bring forth the living souls. This is soul just like man has a soul. So these souls are coming up out of the earth, but we understand this to be the animal soul. That's the only part that comes from the earth, this animal instinct, like our physical blood pumping body. And to help clarify maybe some confusion, these trees that we talked about in another video, they're actually like multiple ones. Each one of these realms that overlap each other have the tree. So it starts here like with the source, the crown from the source, and we go to wisdom and understanding, and then down to knowledge, and then we have the kingdom, like the physical that's cut off. But from the physical, it can develop into a whole nother realm. So that helps you understand how we have this physical animal soul, which seems to have all 10 of these Sephirot or something. So we have like our own version of knowledge. We've created this kind of. It was this barren world, this world of action down here, because we get cut off at this point. This is the heavenly up above, and this is the kingdom. So this single thing down here actually drops down, like the bottom of Yetzirah would maybe where you'd see where it's the cutoff point, but we develop our own version of understanding. So I think with this world, there were no plants and there were not the animals as we know them today, and all this needed to be developed. So in these higher realms, like with the first 6 days, and then also dropping down as God planted this Garden of Eden, he planted the plants. He brought the animals out of the ground again. So this looks like this, where we have like cosmic mind. There's the different wordings, but like everybody's kind of saying the same thing. This is from Ashara Dean's teachings. And so earth, like dimension 1, and dimension 2 would be like animals where we have been here. And as we're entering the golden age, people's vibration levels are getting higher. So people who stay on this animalistic nature of fear and hate, they're not going to be able to survive. That we've kind of jumped into like this 4th dimension. So they're all kind of overlapping each other, and they feed down from above. So in these higher dimensions, they have to feed on down, and now we're like progressing back to where we were to be able to have these higher ways of thinking, like man who is completely upright on 2 feet. So he's thinking with his brain. But if we digressed, where all these souls, they maybe had equal potential, right? Some became tamed, at least, where they would obey higher masters, and then some stayed the lives of the field, and some were completely cursed, like above all else, and they're just licking the dust of the ground. So like as people become more and more cursed, more and more cut off from their higher realms, then they have to be, that whole entire tree of life needs to be formed again. So in our animal world, it looks just like a single tree of life, like just the 10 right there. so we have developed our own version of understanding, our own wisdom, our own splendor, our own foundations, and it's mimicking the higher realms, but it's nothing compared to the higher realms. So I think that helps us to understand how there's like no man to till the ground, and these plants are not growing on their own. So when we get to the flood now, like animals are developed now where they can be eaten. So what happened before the flood is like this time for the choices to be made, and it kind of become more set in who they are, and then he's now going to preserve them according to their kind. But even though all flesh had corrupted itself, he's still taking two of each one of these creeping things. And that's not how he made them in Genesis chapter 1, where there weren't creeping things. Even though in Genesis chapter 1, we do see creeping things mentioned, it's not in this lowest animal realm. So it's some other version, and we know it today as creeping things. But I think what he just made was just wild animals, basically. And then over time, they become domesticated and they kind of stay that way. And same with the plants. Man had to kind of form this on his own. And what comes to mind is with Pharaoh, Pharaoh was providing them their straw in order to make their bricks. But as they rebelled further, then he's saying, you grow your own straw. So I think it's kind of like that, where God didn't do this for them anymore, and the earth would have been barren, and they have to pull that down, that same kind of imprint from above, and then plant that in the earth, where man now has to not just serve the garden, he has to serve the ground from which he was taken. So they're going lower and lower, and man is kind of staying. There's still some flesh that's not corrupted itself, which would be Noah. So that's going to be preserved as the upright mankind. And then he's going to preserve these other classes, but that I don't think we fully see the full development of these unclean animals until like starting with when they exit the garden, just like same with the plants, that there's no seed in the ground until after there's a man to till the ground, to serve the ground. And then fully it's not growing on its own after its kind until the flood. When Moses wrote Genesis, he says the serpent, but we know that when the serpent was in the garden, it was not a serpent until after it left the garden and became creeping. So similar concept with man, the one that comes from the ground. First, actually, he came from above. So we have these realms, and this is Adam Cadmon. So this is a being without a vessel, a being of light, the heavenly man. And to understand that first we were of the heavens, that we're in the image and likeness of God, a divine light without vessels, pure potential. So in our bodies, we define ourselves based on the perception of our bodies. But if we stop doing this, we can be restored back to that heavenly man, that original vessel where really we're infinite beings. We have the fullness of God in us. So if we stop saying that we feel weak, so we are weak, that's just how our body or vessel is feeling, but that's not who we are. So all this would have come down where it's like the realm of angels. So we were these beings of light originally, and that's probably how the animals were also just these lives, these living souls. And based on the choices, like those associated with what becomes the serpent, right, that they get cursed above the beast. So those beasts also got cursed. So this was this time of decision making of how you're going to live life in this world, like the choosing the tree of knowledge, the woman being deceived, wanting the wisdom, but having to struggle to get there. So then these become set, I think, to kind of reproduce after their kind at the time of the flood. So you have the realms of archangels and paradise with angels. So I think after they get kicked out of the garden, it becomes this physical universe more as we know it today, but that's kind of actually developing for a little while. Um, so it's really like we become what we are, the type of humans we are today after the flood.